Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Kat Merryfield, founder and CEO of Cat's Naturals. Hello, Kat Merryfield. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. So I think that you're based in, was it Chattanooga, Tennessee?
We're a little bit north in this little valley called the Sequatchie Valley, and our city is Dunlap.
Got you. Okay, and is that where the business operates out of, or is that where you reside?
Both,
Got you.
both. We settled from the Atlanta area in this beautiful valley about 9 years ago, and we loved it so much we wanted to set up our business here.
Awesome. So what's the landscape look like when it comes to hemp in Tennessee? I mean, obviously, with the Farm Bill passing in 2018, was Tennessee right on board to submit their plan to get it approved and start cultivating, or are you guys? Or where are you at in your first grow season?
We are actually several years into it. We started having a pilot project back in 2014, and that was even before we knew really what it was all about. But it's always been very liberal here as far as hemp goes. It's an agricultural state, so everybody's pretty supportive about getting another crop in to give the farmers another way to make money.
Yeah, that was echoed. I had John Kearns on, who's the founder of New Bloom Labs, and he's from Tennessee, and he mentioned that the what is it? Tobacco was big there, right? So it seems like from
Mhm.
tobacco to hemp, it's a natural transition.
Yeah, and several of our growers were old tobacco growers and even still grow some tobacco crops, and they're very good at growing hemp as well.
Awesome. Well, for those of you listening, we have Kat Merryfield on. As I mentioned, she's the founder and CEO of Cat's Naturals, a CBD company that formulates therapeutic grade hemp-derived blends with quality and consistency in mind. So, Kat, before we jump into your business, I do want to talk about your background and what got you interested and started in cannabis. And from my understanding and the research that I've done, you founded Cat's Naturals in 2015 after discovering the healing power of CBD through your veteran husband, who was managing PTSD at the time. Is that right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's been amazing.
tell us about that and how you even started to think about other natural alternatives as opposed to your typical pharmaceutical remedies.
Well, my journey with natural remedies actually is pretty long. I went to school for natural health and nutrition and then was a certified herbal formulator and did some consulting work in Atlanta for about 8 years. And then my husband and I decided we were going to uproot everybody and move to the country and start an organic farm. And so that's how we ended up in Dunlap. And I was actually originally introduced to CBD through one of the workers who was working on our farm, and he had brought some down, and this was early 2014. He brought some from Michigan, and I had never heard of it. I'd heard of cannabis, obviously. I'd always loved the plant itself and everything that it could do, and believed it to be a medicinal plant that should be in the herbal regime, but I'd never seen it as CBD.
And when he did that in 2014 and it introduced the CBD, what form was it in? Was it flower, or was it already in oil form, tincture form? What did you experience there?
It was actually a tincture, and I had hurt my back, and he handed it to me, and he said, hey, I heard that this won't get you high, but it will take away your pain. I don't know. So I tried it, and it did indeed take away my pain and didn't do anything else. So I was fascinated.
Wow. So, and I know from what I read, Brian, your husband, who served in the military for over 13 years, thank you for your service, Brian. Is that when once you took it, you were like, you know what, maybe this would be something good for my husband, or how did that come about?
Well, yes, originally we gave it to my husband to help him with his knee pain because, being in the military, they do a lot of damage on the body. So he took it for his knee pain. And after a few weeks, he was like, I'm not having those bad dreams anymore. I'm sleeping better. And then after about 6 or 7 weeks, I noticed he wasn't grinding his teeth in his sleep anymore. And his moods just started to get a little bit more regulated. He was able to handle more stress, in a regular day-to-day situation. And I was like, oh my gosh, what else can this do? And that's kind of when we started our journey with trying to make it.
And so you're both co-founders, is that right?
Yeah. So we started working on it together, but he's not really, he doesn't work with herbal remedies. He just takes them when I give them to him. So he was like, we should do this. And originally we had, $3,000 in a savings account. And he was like, now I want you to think hard about this, because if you're going to spend our savings, this better work. And so I had to think about that. I was like, man, I really hope this works, because I feel like it's a missing link in herbal medicine. So we went for it.
Yeah. Well, and with your herbal medicine background, did you have any prior entrepreneurship experience, or was this kind of your first leap into launching a new business?
Well, my family is kind of serial entrepreneurs. We like to work for ourselves. So I had worked for both my father's businesses that he had started, and then I had started my consulting business in Atlanta, and then I sold like soaps and lotions and things like that at farmers markets. And then we started our farm, which was another business. And then when CBD took over our life, we finally, had to shut down the farm and take this full time.
And was that in 2014 when you had just discovered it, or was that a couple of years later?
It actually took 3 years. We ended up going full time in 2017 and launched our first e-commerce site. And that just exploded. We weren't exactly ready for that kind of growth. And so it was a lot of scrambling, trying to figure out, how are we going to scale this business? And in 2018, we grew 1,300% and finally had to get a real facility and set up in town.
Wow, 1,300%. That's incredible. Congratulations on that. So tell us a little bit about your experience at when you were first starting this CBD company. So I would imagine that early on in 2017, you're experiencing different pain points and challenges that everyone in the industry has experienced. Did you anything specific in terms of like your point of sale system or banking, or anybody who maybe worked with you in the past and then raised the red flag when they learned more about it? It was, cannabis or hemp-derived products.
Oh yeah. I mean, if there's a problem, we have experienced it. We have been shut down by 12 payment processors over the years. We had all of our funds seized by PayPal at one point. We have lost bank accounts. We've had, partners who we were working with just decide that it was all about the money for them, and then trying to separate yourself there. People who would accuse us of giving them marijuana, and just through everything, it's like, how do you bounce back? And it was because of our passion for what it was doing for people that it was like, it doesn't matter what happens, we just have to keep going.
That's really, I mean, a great mindset to have, especially in an industry that's burgeoning like this, right? It's so new. Obviously, federal guideline or federal regulations are still very, very tight. And so the fact that you guys persevered through all those tribulations and challenges is pretty remarkable. Are there any other challenges that you can think of outside of just the POS and banking, where you also had struggled and had issues?
Well, I mean, we've had people, accuse us of not taking care of our children because we're in the cannabis industry and they think that we're giving our children pot. Um, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around the plant itself. So, we'd have farmers that would come up to us and say, does does hemp turn into marijuana if it's grown long enough? And I was like, well, no, not exactly, you know. So it's been a lot of education to help lift the stigma, but our town has really been great. We've been able to talk to the mayor and the county commissioner and the police force, and they're all supporters of what we're doing. Um, there's a lot of family challenges, you know, as they tried to understand why we were sacrificing so much, because they said, you know, you're dealing in something illegal and you're putting your family on the line for this. And so trying to educate them through the fact that we believe in this so much and it's not the same thing. And even as marijuana, it is not an evil plant.
Right. As you have those conversations, I mean, is it well received? Like, I mean, I know when I'm explaining, like, you know, to my parents or my, you know, my grandparents or aunts and uncles, it's like, look, no, like, due to the farm bill, you know, the hemp plant is now regulated to to ensure, like, it can't go above that 0.3% THC threshold, right? So are you able to get that far in those conversations, or is it just like, nope, it's cannabis, it's bad, and they just kind of tune you out?
Actually, topicals were a great way to get people started because, you know, I would explain to them, it's not going to sink through your skin and get into your bloodstream, I promise. So just try a little bit on your knee. And if you like it, then maybe we could go on to trying a little sublingual. And so that was kind of what I would say the gateway product into helping people who are very much against cannabis as a rule decide that, oh, that does work and I don't feel funny. And then you'd get them to try one drop of the liquid. And then they would say, oh, okay, I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
And when we first started, you know, I'm from the South and I've always been from the South. And so I understand the way Southerners think. And I knew it was going to be a challenge to get them to try things. So we originally started with THC free products. And that way, you know, I gave them to my children and
broad
then I gave them,
so broad spectrum products is what you're saying.
actually back then it was just isolate.
Okay.
That was the only thing that we could find. You know, nobody was really extracting the THC out of out of the crude. This was how young the industry was at that time. You had crude and you had isolate, and finding anything else was almost impossible.
Wow.
So, you know, by showing them that my children did not come up positive in a drug test, it allowed them to feel comfortable with the fact that we were 100% THC free. And that's what really started to open things up for us here.
Right. Okay. So the real world experience isn't saying, no, look, try this thing and tell me if you're feeling high or not, which they won't, obviously, because it's CBD. So
Mm-hmm.
they would become believers by just kind of trying it out, and you slowly doing that by using tinctures and salves first, right? That makes
Exactly.
sense. Yeah. Um, well, let's talk about like some of the chronic ailments, you know, and these natural alternatives or the various cannabinoids that we've discovered thus far in the plant, and how those cannabinoids marry with our endocannabinoid system. I know that, you know, when I looking at your website, Cat's Naturals, y'all are really big on the herbal medicine and the healing properties of CBD. So let's talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid system and what Cat's Naturals viewpoint is when it comes to cannabinoids in that space.
Okay. When we first started, you know, nobody really was talking about the endocannabinoid system. It was all about, hey, we think it does this, we think it does that, but how does it really work? And so when we first started, we took it to the markets where we were selling our other products and said, you know, there isn't a limit here. We don't know exactly what this does. So you guys come back and tell us what it's doing for you. And that was where our eyes first got opened to the amazing healing properties. And when you don't have somebody telling you what to take it for, you come back and say, hey, it helped with like my blood sugar levels lowered. It helped with my anxiety. It helped with my pain. It helped with neuropathy. It helped with my glaucoma. You know, it was just like, wow, all of these things it's doing. And then in about 2016, 17 to 18 was when they really started talking about our endocannabinoid system and how, the CB1 receptors and the CB2 receptors, as well as, other receptors are antagonized by cannabis. And so I liked the analogy of, your little brother and how he pokes at you until you react. And that's what CBD does to like our vanilloid system and our serotonin system and our opioid system and various other systems that help to regulate our inflammatory response and our sleep patterns, our reward and punishment mechanisms, our hormonal balances. And it affects so many systems that it's not a cure-all, but it certainly does help to balance the body. And the body starts to choose the things that have been shutting down and then start to reactivate what's needed in a individual's system.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm happy that you said, it's not an end all cure, but it is something that is a great remedy for these ailments that you're talking about, like inflammation, and the others that you said. One thing that I know we're all waiting on is the FDA guidelines, for messaging, right? In terms of how we can talk about what exactly CBD and the other cannabinoids do. But I did read an article that you were featured in that talked about CBN, as a sleep aid alternative. So, to add on to what you're saying about the value add of CBD, let's talk a little bit about your understanding of CBN and the benefits there.
Okay. So probably, I guess it was a little bit early 2019, we started really understanding that there was lots of other cannabinoids that were having a role in the healing processes. Everybody was talking about this entourage effect and how everything was working together. And me being a curious person, I wanted to know, well, what is this specific cannabinoid doing? What is this one doing? And we started out studying CBG, and using it as an isolated form, putting it into different concentrates and seeing, how does this play a role with people's bodies? What are they feeling? And then this year, we finally started
What did you find?
seeing,
What did you find with CBG?
we actually found that it promoted energy and metabolic processes started to wake up in your system. The first time I ever took it, I had asked the extractor, I said, have you ever used this? And he said, yeah, I have. While we were extracting it, I used about 12 milligrams and it felt amazing. Maybe you could start there. So I tried starting with 12 milligrams and I got in my car and I put some under my tongue. And then all of a sudden my heart was racing and I felt like I want to just go run a marathon. And I was stuck in my car. And so the next time I tried it, I went way back with it and tried at 4 milligrams. And over time, I've been able to work myself back up. But just like every cannabinoid, it works differently in everybody's body. And they really need to start low first and work their way up.
Hmm.
But with CBN, it was a powerful cannabinoid because it isn't naturally found in the plant. And it is a conversion of THC. And when I was first introduced to the cannabinoid, the guy said, it's kind of like when you leave your bag of weed in your car and it's real hot and then you dig it out sometime and you smoke it and you just get really stoned. And I was like, okay, so it makes you sleepy? And he was like, incredibly sleepy. So when we first started working with it, I was like, okay, let's try it on its own. And it had an amazing sleepy feeling, but I woke up the next morning still feeling sleepy. So we found that mixing it with a little bit of CBD, some CBG could actually help have a relaxed, clear-headed, wake up feeling, rejuvenated kind of feeling. But we offer it as a concentrate and then also as a blend so that people can mix it with their favorite formula.
Got you. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because what I've been told with other guests on the podcast is that, CBD is great if you're high, if you've smoked a lot of THC. It's a good counterbalance to THC. So if you're feeling really high, take some CBD gummies to kind of bring you down, and that makes sense for what you're saying in terms of that groggy feeling if you're just taking CBN by itself as an isolate, as opposed to that entourage effect with all the other cannabinoids in it to balance it out.
Exactly.
And that's really what you discovered and learned that through just trial and error, right? Basically just testing one,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a scientist at heart, you know. I love to see how things work in a laboratory setting. I love to see if you administer this much, what happens? You know, that kind of metered reasoning. And then after I write all of this stuff down, you know, I compile all the evidence and then I start formulating to decide how are these things going to mix, and then I start giving them out to people to try. So usually a product release in our company, it can take 12 to 18 months before I'm ready to actually put something out on the market. So sometimes we can be a little behind the curve, but we've been thinking about this for a long time. I just want to make sure that it's really going to help our customers and not just be something we're trying to make money at.
Mhm. And that science trial by error approach seems to be like a core component of what Cats Naturals does. So, do you want to talk about other ways how you're integrating these different cannabinoids into your products?
Sure. So, you know, we started out with the isolate, and then we went into full spectrum. And then as we were developing, I started seeing that different crops had specific profiles that we really enjoyed. And so we would work with the farmer for those specific grows so that our full spectrum had truly a full spectrum of cannabinoids in it. And that's when we started seeing that, you know, certain types of ailments required those different cannabinoids. And then we went into, hey, what would happen if these different cannabinoids were given in metered doses? And I was speaking with a gentleman who came up with a product called like a gene marker, where he would test the genetics of people, and then he could read which one of the cannabinoids was actually going to work the best with people.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Because, like you said
Yeah,
earlier, I mean, all of our endocannabinoid systems different, and we react differently as human beings, individuals, right, to different cannabinoids. So that's amazing that he's able to do that.
yeah. And I mean, it just lit up my brain. I was like, oh my goodness, if we can find out exactly what we need, and then we have these specific concentrates, people could mix their own formulas for their bodies, and that will make it great just for them. And so, you know, I feel like that's kind of the way of the future. We're going to see a lot more of those genetic tests so people can get very specific in what they need.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that takes personalized medicine to a whole new level or a whole new way of looking at it, right?
Right. And that's what we're all looking for. You know, the individual is so much the forefront of this new generation. And if medicine can also be that personalized, how much more can we grow?
Right. The whole idea of reverse engineering that the healthcare process in a way that you come in and, like you're saying, you get a genetic scan of yourself and you're recommended cannabinoids based off of your genetic DNA, your genetic profile, right? Is far more intuitive and makes more sense, as opposed to coming in, telling the doctor how you feel, and then them prescribing you medicines or things that were just kind of made up through thin air. It's not as personalized as we're talking about. And so I agree that that is the future, and cannabis is going to play a huge part in that.
It is. I mean, it's missing from both the medical profession and from the herbal medicine. And, you know, that all started, of course, with prohibition, where it was just all of a sudden taken away from us. But sometimes I wonder if a lot of the ailments that are plaguing our society are because of our lack of stimulation of our endocannabinoid system. I mean, it's been 70 years since we've had it, but once upon a time it was in our food, it was given to our animals, we were wearing it, we were given it as medicine, and then all of a sudden it's ripped away, and the very things that it cures are the things that we're being plagued with. So it's just one of those correlations where I'm hoping we'll start to see as it comes back into society that, you know, autoimmune diseases will start to go, and you'll stop seeing so many, you know, problems with inflammation and with anxiety, which is running rampant.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair assumption. And to your point, that because it's been in the prohibition era has lasted for 70 years, we've kind of lost our roots And what's true to that point is the fact that the endocannabinoid system is not even discussed in universities and colleges where doctors are being educated. I've had guests on that have said that they had to do that research and learn about the endocannabinoid system themselves. Not It wasn't being taught in school. And I can type on my Mac endocannabinoid system, and that word doesn't even recognized as a real word.
Hmm.
In fact, I posted that today on social media. So it's crazy. We do have a long way to go, but there's hope and light at the end of the tunnel, simply because of how much public support is out there right now, right? um,
Exactly. People have been begging to have cannabis entered into society. And now we're on the very cusp of it. And we're starting to see things like CBD and CBG and THC Delta 8 and, CBN, all of these different cannabinoids. And why the Delta 9 specifically is so demonized, I'm really just not sure, but for whatever reason, it will come back around. And with that, people who are being educated on exactly how to use it, you're not going to see the repercussions that we see from an illicit market. I just feel like it's something our society truly needs to see a reintroduction to.
Well, I think my opinion is that when prohibition happened, that 70 years ago, like you mentioned, it was. I mean, the plant itself was a threat to industry, right? I mean,
Hmm.
outside of the medicinal use of cannabis, there were a lot of material goods that were produced from hemp. And you see the cotton industry now, you see the paper industry, you see the ethanol industry. A lot of these industries that are thriving, and they have been for many years, but they're not as sustainable as they should be. Once and with the 2018 Farm Bill being passed, I mean, that's huge, because now, especially in states like Texas, mass cultivation can happen. And we got a lot of land out here, especially when it comes to outdoor grows. So hopefully in the coming years we can look to industrial hemp as a viable way of producing goods like plastics and other things that are more sustainable than what we're doing right now, because it's not working.
Absolutely. And I mean, the greatest thing about hemp is it can help clean up all the mess that those other industries have made, and then we can sequester it and then build again. So I think it's very, very exciting. It's just that the infrastructure has been taken down. So it's going to take a lot of time to rebuild industries where they understand the process of working with hemp. They rebuild the factories so that they're, you know, able to work with the hemp, which is a very different process. But after that's reestablished, I mean, the growing of it is the easy part. It's the processing of it that's the challenge.
And you're referring to the decortication process, right? The way
Hmm.
the fiber from the herd. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the infrastructure is not in place. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to establish and create those type of plants, those processing plants. And until that infrastructure is in place, you're right, we can sit on product all day long, but that day will come and that investment will happen. It's just going to take time. We're right at the forefront of this
Yep.
industry, so it's very exciting to see. um, but to go back to the cannabinoids and how y'all are leveraging those cannabinoids in your products, let's talk about the secondary molecules. So, how do y'all approach terpene profiles for different applications in Cat Naturals products?
So from the beginning, I was very interested in not putting anything synthetic into our products because, the people who are taking them are usually taking them to get well, and you don't want to counteract that by having synthetics. So I knew that the flavor was not going to be accepted easily. Cannabis just tastes like cannabis. So in some ways you had to mask that. And the only thing I could think of was, hey, let's pair these with essential oils. And these essential oils can help with the health effect that we're trying to go for in the products. And then, of course, later on, fast forward a couple of years, and now they're extracting terpenes from these essential oils. And the best way to understand that is, let's say an essential oil is a soup, and the terpenes are all of the ingredients in the soup. So where we used to have to take the whole soup, now we can get just the carrots or just the pepper and use those. And each one of those components has a purpose. And that's what's so amazing about it, is just like the cannabis plant has so many different components that make up its whole effect, essential oils or terpenes have the same thing. And so when you take those, like say you want a product that's going to be working for pain, you want to make sure that you've got a high B-caryophyllene profile in it. And it's going to have kind of a spicy effect. So you may want to balance that out with a little bit of, say, limonene or some linalool, so that you have those citrus and the floral undertones, but they're also adding relaxation and general uplifting. When I go into a dispensary now, I read the plants by their profile instead of like, this is what it's supposed to be.
When you describe it that way, you sound like a culinary chef, and the weird thing is I'm kind of like watering at the mouth, and it's not even like, okay, really good. Like do a hint of this and a sprinkle of that, and but how did you get there? Like how did you get to that process? Like I would imagine at first you would just have to understand each terpene profile within each strain, and then from there really study and drill in and dial into what the effects of that particular terpene is that really how you did it? Or
That's exactly how it started. So, I try to stay very connected to the industry, get to know all the different people who are in it, the extractors, the people who are working with terpenes, the people who are working with the different cannabinoids, other formulators, other brands. Just as long as we keep working together, we can cover a lot more ground faster. And so, as one person gets an idea, another person who has that skill set will spin on that idea and go, oh, that's a totally great idea. Let's go ahead and try extracting this. And then I'll say, hey, send me everything as separate products. And so they'll send me all these different terpenes as separate terpenes. And then I'll say, hey, when I mix this and this, it was amazing. And he'll say, oh my goodness, that's found in this strain. That's why it works so well in that strain. So, it was a lot of going back and forth and doing some reverse engineering, and also learning a little bit from that's the plant profile. And now when you smell a flower, you kind of know what the undertones and what the overtones are going to do for you. It's the feeling of the plant comes from the terpenes, whereas like the medical benefit is oftentimes from the cannabinoids.
Wow. Well, I having hear you explain that, I want to be part of the pilot program. As you're testing new, applications for the cannabinoids and whatnot, sign me up. I'm in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll send you all kinds of stuff. You'll be like, I don't know if I want to try anymore.
No, I have time. That's not an issue at all. I love to try things. So let's talk about the other secondary molecule, and that's the flavonoids, which I don't know too much about, to be honest with you. So do y'all dabble much in the flavonoid research and application there?
Not right now. I've always seen flavor as part of the terpene, as part of the plant itself. But I think what they're getting at is even deeper than the things that I have knowledge of. So I can't speak very far into flavonoids. I can't even say it.
You're not alone. That's something that I need to brush up on and learn more about. So hopefully one of the upcoming guests will know about it so we can learn about it.
You'll have to let me know so I can listen.
Yes, I definitely will. So I want to go back to what you said earlier and how you guys had that huge spike. I think it was a year after you launched, 2017, 2018, and you saw that 1,300% increase in sales with your e-commerce site. So obviously, y'all did well. You're one of the leading CBD companies out there, but the market is super competitive now, right? And almost in a way, it's saturated. There's a lot of players in the game. So how does Cat's Naturals differentiate and operate a CBD company in this highly competitive space?
Well, a lot of it is paying attention to our customers. We're not in business for ourselves, we're in business for our customers. So when our customers say they have a need, we try to fill it. And, always being conscientious of what the market is doing. And back when we had that spike, it was because we saw that the market was lacking in consistency and actual certifications. And so we went that extra mile and spent a lot of money getting certified, so that our lab was inspected. And that even took me going to the state and knocking on doors and going and sitting in legislature meetings to just say, hey, will somebody please classify us and inspect us? Because this is kind of getting ridiculous. Um, Talking to our customers a lot, because early on, it seemed like everybody was peddling snake oil. And so I spent a lot of time actually talking to our customers. I was like, it's an open phone policy. Call me if you have questions. So I formed relationships with those early customers, and then they told their friends, and it just spread. And then we started working with some affiliates. And this was before there was a lot of companies out there, And so we made relationships with those affiliates. And it was before you could pay to get your company, to the top of the list. It was like they wanted to try your product. They would review your product. They would test your product. And then if they believed in it, they would push it out there. And so that helped a lot getting our name out. And we were voted, the top 3 CBD companies in the nation 2 years in a row. That was back in 18 and 19. And so that helped a lot with people knowing who we were. And that's when that spike happened. But right after, we really got to the point where we were succeeding was when we had a major credit card shutdown and lost our entire e-commerce site for 6 months. And that was pretty devastating. And we're still working on recovering from that because COVID hit right after that happened. So, it's all about perseverance and continuing to stay true to your mission, which is to help your customers achieve their highest self.
Right. Well, there's going to be a sense of gratitude, I think, for companies like Cats Naturals and the other players that were legacy, that were in early on in the game, and like you mentioned, provided that service of consistency in their products. And once federal regulations overturned and there aren't as much red tape and hoops to jump through, we're going to look back and thank business owners like you for going through that stuff, because I know it's not easy.
No, it isn't easy, but it's been worth it. Um, I've always been self-funded. So, the challenge has always been, how can we stay at the cutting edge, but fund ourselves through this growth process? And, so a lot of what we've continued to put our money into is, trying to continue research and staying at the forefront of technology, because some larger company who has more funding may be able to take that even more to the masses. And it could be, our studies that helped fuel that major growth for the industry. I'm not looking to be the biggest in the industry. I just want to be a part of it.
Mhm.
So, everybody's working together here.
Right. And that's encouraging to hear, and as they should be, because there's already that have been through the ringer on the THC adult use cannabis side, right? And so I think there's a lot of learnings that can be taken from that specific space within the whole industry and apply those learnings. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So Kat, tell us about Kat's Craft Collection. I looked at that on your website, and I'll tell you, I really did love the packaging, the branding. It was beautiful. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Cat's Craft Collection was kind of the idea of bringing CBD to the public like the marijuana brings those craft products to the market. We wanted to educate people not just on that CBD is CBD is CBD, but that each one of these plant profiles makes a difference. And then, we chose the very first one, and it was T1, and we were like, oh, T Tennessee, so it's Tennessee 1, and we decided to really expand on Tennessee as an agricultural industry and as a place that's on the forefront of growing hemp for cannabis. And so we started working with another company that was an extraction company, and we started working with one of the biggest growers of violets in the world. It's called Optimera, and they happened to be in Nashville, and said, hey, let's partner together and do an indoor grow. So it's very, very craft grow, really put attention to detail into that, make sure that terpene profile is just really popping. And then the extractor did a cold process press, just like you would for resin. That way we could keep all of that profile intact. And then we took it to our place and formulated it and created what we call, the flower in a bottle. So when you pop the cork on it, it actually, you can smell the terpene profile just like you would the fresh flower.
Wow.
And then, I was like, oh, this is, apothecary style. This is great. I want it in this bottle. And in order to keep that terpene profile fresh, let's go ahead and seal that bottle with a wax seal and make this a real collectible. And then the artwork was done by a local artist and called Status Serigraph. And I loved his work because, he's worked with Wu-Tang and he's done several other large artists' artwork. And so we just told him, we're making this craft product and we need a label that really showcases Tennessee agriculture and hemp. And he nailed it the first time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that I noticed. Obviously, I couldn't smell the terpene profile and crack the wax seal, but the packaging is beautiful. Yeah.
And now we're kind of using that as a launching pad for a new podcast that we're doing called The Good Medicine Show. And, just seeing his artwork being able to be used on something bigger than just a bottle is really nice because he's just such an amazing artist.
Nice. I love fellow podcasters. So what is the name of it and what's it about again?
It's called The Good Medicine Show.
Good medicine.
And it's all about herbal medicine and cannabis and the missing links, and it showcases local music artists and crafters, and then it's a lot like this style where we just have conversations with another local herbalist using what our customers have taken to us and said, this is a concern for us, or this is what we're interested in knowing more about. And then we have this conversation in the middle of it. We have these artists play their great tunes and talk to us about their concerns and questions. And it's just a really nice free flow, but we just started. We've only had one. Our next show is November 12th.
Nice. Well, congratulations on launching that. And everyone, you heard it here, The Good Medicine Show. You got to check it out. Download.
Definitely.
Yes. Well, Kat, we've talked a lot about a lot of great things, a lot of great insights that you've shared. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we sign off here?
I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of this industry, either as a customer or as a fellow producer. It's a hard road, and we need every single person involved in order to make a true change for the world. So thank you, everybody.
Well said. And Kat, where can people find, your website, your social media, all that kind of stuff before we sign off?
We are at www.katsnaturals.com, and you can see us on Facebook and on Instagram and a little bit on Pinterest. It's a new one.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Really appreciate all the insights and information that you shared today, and look forward to hoping having you on in the future.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me today.
Yes. And thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.